Marvel was dead in 1996, bankrupt, bleeding money. The company that once owned the most powerful fictional gods on Earth, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, was now worth almost nothing. Comic shops were closing. Investors had disappeared. The brand looked like a corpse, waiting to be buried. And then, it happened. When Marvel was seconds from total collapse, the executives made one decision, a dark, desperate deal that would change history. They started selling their crown jewels, Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four, to Hollywood studios for scraps. It looked like suicide, like Marvel was cutting pieces off its own body just to stay alive another month. Sony bought Spider-Man, Fox grabbed X-Men, Universal took Hulk. Marvel didn't just lose characters, they sold their future billion-dollar lifeline for pennies. But here's the disturbing truth. That so-called suicide deal is exactly what saved Marvel and turned the brand into a $30 billion empire. The decision that looked like the end was actually the beginning. And the reason it worked is darker and far more calculated than anyone expected. From the outside, Marvel's decision looked insane. They were selling the very characters that defined them. But inside the boardroom, the logic was brutal. Marvel needed cash, right now, or the company would collapse within weeks. No bank would lend them money. No investor wanted to touch a dying comic publisher. The only thing left to sell was their future. So Marvel cut a deal with Hollywood. You take our heroes. You make the movies. We survive today. In return, Marvel kept a tiny slice of the profits, not from the films, but from the toys and merchandise tied to the characters. That small clause, ignored by Hollywood at the time, would later turn into a gold mine. The studios thought they were exploiting a dying company, but Marvel was quietly planting a financial time bomb right under their feet. At first, Hollywood laughed. They believed Marvel was finished, a relic of the past, selling off its own organs just to survive. But then something unexpected happened. Movies based on Marvel characters started making money, a lot of money. X-Men exploded at the box office. Spider-Man broke records. Suddenly, the characters Wall Street once called worthless were printing cash for other companies. And here's the twist. Every time a Marvel hero appeared in a hit movie, Marvel, the so-called dead company, sold more toys, more shirts, more merchandise. The studios made billions at the box office, but Marvel made money every single day after. Hollywood thought they bought superheroes. In reality, they paid to resurrect Marvel's brand, for Marvel itself. The more successful the movies became, the stronger Marvel returned, without spending a single dollar on production. By the mid-2000s, Marvel had done the impossible. They rebuilt their brand using other people's money. But there was one problem. Marvel no longer owned the heroes that were making all the money. Sony owned Spider-Man. Fox owned X-Men and Fantastic Four. Universal held Hulk. Marvel had a brand again, but not the characters that made it valuable. So the executives made an even bigger gamble. They decided to create their own movie studio, Marvel Studios, and build a cinematic universe around the heroes they still owned. The ones nobody in Hollywood wanted. Iron Man, Thor, Captain America. Back then, these were B-tier heroes, considered unmarketable, unprofitable, even boring. Marvel was about to bet everything, again, on heroes the industry had already written off as failures. And if this gamble failed, Marvel wouldn't just lose money. This time, the company would disappear for good. Marvel didn't just gamble. They loaded the gun against their own head. To fund Marvel Studios, they took a $525 million loan, secured not by buildings or assets, but by the film rights to the heroes they still had left. If those first movies failed, the bank would seize Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, and Marvel would lose everything, forever. No studio in Hollywood believed this plan would work. No one thought audiences would pay to watch second-rate heroes, made by a bankrupt comic company. But Marvel had one advantage no one else did. They understood their characters better than Hollywood ever could. They weren't building a single movie. They were building a universe, a long-term trap designed to keep viewers coming back. Film after film, year after year. In 2008, Marvel pulled the trigger on their first test, Iron Man. A character studios had rejected for years as too boring to carry a film. They didn't hire a safe, obedient actor. They chose Robert Downey Jr., an ex-addict freshly out of scandals and rehab. Hollywood called it reckless. Some called it suicidal. But when the film hit theaters, everything changed. Iron Man didn't just succeed, it detonated. $585 million at the box office, global hype. And something far more important. For the first time in decades, people believed in Marvel again. And buried inside the end credits was a secret message. A single scene that revealed Marvel's real plan. This wasn't just a movie, this was phase one. Iron Man wasn't a victory. It it was a signal flare. Marvel had proved one thing. If they could make the world care about a nobody hero, they could make them care about anyone. But here's the part nobody in Hollywood understood. Marvel wasn't planning hits. They were building addiction. Every film would connect to the next. Every ending would open a door instead of closing one. You couldn't watch just one Marvel movie. You had to watch them all. This wasn't cinema. It was engineered dependency, a financial machine disguised as storytelling. With Iron Man's success, Marvel switched on the device. Next came Hulk, then Thor, then Captain America, not as separate products, but as pieces of a trap, closing in real time. By 2012, the trap was ready to close. Marvel unleashed the move no other studio in history had dared to attempt. They merged multiple franchises into one film, The Avengers. This wasn't just a movie. It was the payoff of 4 years of psychological conditioning. Audiences didn't buy a ticket for one hero. They bought a ticket to protect their previous investment of time and emotion. If you'd watch Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Captain America, you were now obligated to see how the threads came together. The Avengers made $1.5 billion, not because it was good, but because Marvel had trained the audience to need closure. Hollywood called it genius. Wall Street called it domination. But in truth, it was something darker, a multi-film dependency system disguised as entertainment. After the Avengers, Marvel was no longer the company that almost died. It became the company that rewired the entire industry. Studios everywhere tried to copy the formula, DC, Universal, even MonsterVerse. But none of them understood the real trick. They copied the costumes. Marvel engineered the psychology. While others chased single hits, Marvel designed compulsion, a structure where missing one movie breaks the experience. That's not storytelling. That's behavioral control. And now, Marvel had something they'd never had before. Power. Real, unstoppable, financial, and cultural power. Enough power to do the unthinkable, to spend billions buying back the very heroes they once sold for scraps. The circle was almost complete. Marvel didn't come back to buy their heroes politely. They came back with Disney money and a loaded gun made of success. One by one, the pieces they'd sold in bankruptcy were taken back with force. Disney acquired Marvel for $4 billion. And with Marvel resurrected and profitable, the negotiations flipped overnight. Sony, Fox, Universal, they were no longer dealing with a dying publisher. They were facing a global empire with infinite leverage. Fox was eventually forced to surrender X-Men and Fantastic Four in a $71 billion acquisition deal. Sony had to renegotiate Spider-Man on Marvel's terms, after realizing they couldn't win without the MCU audience. Marvel had pulled off the ultimate reversal. They sold their heroes to survive and bought them back as conquerors. By the time the heroes returned home, Marvel had completed one of the most brutal corporate reversals in modern history. They were no longer reacting to the market, they were dictating it. And every studio that had once mocked them was now forced to follow their rules or die trying. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Marvel's rise wasn't built on creativity or luck. It was built on fear and control. Fear of missing the next film. Fear of not understanding the crossover. Fear of being out of the loop. Marvel didn't sell movies. Marvel sold obligation. And obligation is the most profitable product in entertainment history. And yet, even after all of this, most people still believe Marvel's success was magic, luck, or just good movies. They don't understand that every step was engineered. Bankruptcy, Arrow asset sale, Arrow brand, resurrection on other studios, money Arrow dependency, trap Arrow, buyback Arrow monopoly. This wasn't a comeback story. It was a calculated corporate ambush, executed over 2 decades. Marvel didn't defeat its enemies in a fight. It let them feed the beast until it was strong enough to eat them alive. It stands as one of the most ruthless long-game strategies ever seen in entertainment. And now that Marvel sits on the throne, the final question isn't how they rose, but who will dare to challenge them now? But here's the irony. Marvel's greatest threat now may not come from the outside. It may come from inside the empire itself. When a company becomes too big, too safe, too certain of its own power, it stops fighting like an underdog and starts rotting like a monopoly. Audiences are showing signs of fatigue. Some films are underperforming. Critics are no longer afraid to attack the brand. The same machine that once engineered addiction might now be engineering its own decline. Because once the audience stops fearing they'll miss something, the spell breaks. And if the spell breaks, Marvel could fall the same way it once rose. Slowly, invisibly, then all at once. And this is the part where history becomes a mirror. Because the exact same pattern that once destroyed Marvel in the 90s is slowly forming again, under a different name, complacency. Back then, Marvel died because it stopped innovating, stopped risking, stopped listening. Today, the danger is identical. But now, they have so much more to lose. In the 90s, they lost money. Now, they could lose the myth, the cultural empire, the unquestioned authority. A collapse then was a financial failure. A collapse today would be a civilization-level humiliation, witnessed by billions. That's why the Marvel story isn't over. It's not a framed victory. It's a loaded gun, pointed straight at the future. So, the real question is no longer, how did Marvel rise? We know that answer now. The question that matters is this: will Marvel repeat the cycle and collapse again the same way it once died? Or will it reinvent itself before the fall arrives? Because the scariest thing about empires is not how they conquer, it's how they crumble, slowly, silently, and then all at once. This story is not finished. The most important chapter hasn't happened yet. The rise was only Act 1. Act 2, the reckoning, is still to come.